Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Healing Beyond Narcissism. Thank you for tuning in to my channel. I hope the information you find here helps you on your healing journey. If you are on one, if you're not on one, that's okay too. So the information I have here on this channel is dedicated specifically to narcissistic abuse. And so my whole goal on this channel is to make sure that we understand the differences between narcissistic abuse and other type of abuse, right? And the narcissistic abuse, specifically because of certain characteristics, certain dynamics, is mostly hidden. So we're not aware of it most of the time. And which is the reason why we tend to stay in those kind of dynamics longer than we should. So today I'll go over the difference between narcissistic abuse and other abusive behaviors or the type of abuses that are not narcissistic, because we have so many different other abuses. But however, narcissistic abuse is very specific. It has its own type, its own kind, its own lane. So I'll go over it, and I'll go over actually both in a comparison side by side to be able for us to understand what kind of dynamic are we in. And if it's the type of dynamic that is categorized as narcissistic abuse, for us to understand that it is very unsafe. Because I have went through narcissistic abuse myself for over 15 years. And not only actually during that specific marriage that I have went through it, I have went through it in childhood also, through family members, through caregivers, through siblings, right? So just to make sure that we understand that narcissistic abuse is not only in relationships, it can happen within our own family, our own dynamic, the dynamic we grew up in with our parents, right? Sometimes we grew up with narcissistic parents. And because we grew up with narcissistic parents, unfortunately, it becomes a pattern that we are very familiar with. We are very used to. So we tend to, unfortunately, attract. I would not even say attract, I would say more like tolerate. So we stay longer than we should with narcissists or people who have narcissistic tendencies without even understanding that we are within those dynamics. We stay there without knowing because it's a familiar pattern. It's something that we used to, we know it. So we're more likely to stay in it. We're more likely to see it, identify with it, right? So that's one of the reasons that we unfortunately can suffer and struggle through narcissistic abuse, because we don't actually see the pattern as something that is detrimental to us. So we tend to stay in it. So in this case, I will actually go ahead and talk about the comparison, so we kind of know. And then when we know, we should do better, right? So narcissistic abuse, really, if we understand the process a little bit more than we actually know, we're more likely to act on it, right? And not only acting on it, but acting on it in a safe way, because exiting narcissistic abuse can be very, very unsafe. It can be very unsafe, especially when the narcissist or the person who have narcissistic, most of the time, really, people who have narcissistic patterns, they can heal those narcissistic patterns over time. They can rehabilitate. But narcissists, people who are narcissists in their core, who should be actually diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, those individuals will not allow us to exit out of those abusive relationships, those narcissistic abusive relationships, without detrimental consequences. So we have to be mindful that understanding the type of dynamic we're in can be very helpful for us to make an exit without actually harming ourselves in the process, or allowing them to harm us in the process, in addition to the harm we already have sustained over the years or over several months, right? So primarily, narcissistic abuse, really, we have to look at it as the narcissists themselves. The entire reason why they actually abuse us is actually to making sure that their fragile ego is feeling superior, is feeling bigger, better than us, right? And the entire the entire plot behind any and everything when it comes to narcissistic abuse is to be able to belittle us, is to be able to take us out of our own selves, to bring us lower than what we are, what we were when we entered that relationship. Once we are lower in the sense of the self-esteem, power, understanding, goals, drive, making sure that isolation too, making sure that we don't have family around us, we don't have no one around us, we rely solely on them, we make them our God, we put them on the pedestal, they are the one and only one who will give us any and everything. So therefore that makes them, that feeds that ego, that fragile ego, it feeds it, it makes it, it inflates it, even though it's so tiny a little bit, but all the things that, so they actually create a world, and that world, they need you or us within that world to be able to create it. In that world, they're the king and we're the peasants, right? So it's kind of that analogy. We have to be mindful. That's literally what that is. They have to create this kingdom. They're the king and or queen, right? And everybody else are the peasants. If they have children, those children are peasants too, because at early age, they will try to groom them. They will try to actually teach them certain things. They will try to making sure that those kids actually give them validation, give them, idealize them, give them, admire them, right? As the best mom, the best dad, the best provider, the best whoever, right? That validation is very much necessary for that fragile ego to feel important, to feel inflated. So that's narcissistic abuse. That's the motivation, the primary motivation of narcissistic abuse. That's literally that, to have that validation. Now, the other type of abusive relationships that are not narcissistic is mostly to gain power and control. So therefore we see poor emotional regulation. We see unresolved personal trauma. So those are people that they went through certain things, and during childhood, they were not taught properly how to regulate their emotions. They were not really taught how to treat, they have never seen healthy relationships. Therefore, they don't know really how to be a husband or a wife or, a partner. How, therefore, it's more like a power struggle, a parent-power dynamic, especially when there are cultural differences. Certain cultures have more of a tendency to push onto toxic masculinity, right? So therefore they have that toxic masculinity when it comes to the man. They have the toxic masculinity ingrained in them within that culture. So therefore they come in with their relationships with that power dynamic, feeling that I have to be the powerful one. I have to be the one who have the control in this relationship. And they do not really approach relationships or as partnerships. It's more like, I'm the boss, you're not the boss, you're my employee, so therefore you have to listen to me, you have to do what I say. But it's not more like, hey, let's work together, let's do things together, let's see where things take us, right? Let's build together. So it's not that dynamic at all. So therefore, again, you have insecurities, substance abuse, you have so many other things, so many other traumatic patterns that actually are fuel abusive, those other abusive patterns, those other abusive behaviors that go into abusive relationships that are not narcissistic. So we have to be mindful of the differences. So that difference is very important for us to be able to see that. So we have to also see that the dynamic in narcissistic abuse is heavy on the covert psychology, because it's whole heavy on the covert side of things, where things are hidden. That's one of the reasons, again, we stay in them longer than we should. There is that manipulation, right? Which is gaslighting, love bombing. And then there's the devaluation, and then triangulation, and then, smearing and smear campaign. So the smear campaign is most of the time when actually we try to leave them. And it's most of the time when we do not actually provide them what they need. So therefore, what they do is they try to go and bring your name outside and make it like, oh, they're a bad person. They're this, they're that. And they're doing it behind your back. Sometimes to friends and family members. And sometimes also it's a way also to isolate us. to tell people that we did this, we did that, we did that, so people can say, oh, I do not want to associate myself with them. I'd rather put a distance between us, right? So they do that. That's the smart campaign. The devaluation, again, is in the beginning. The love bombing is the beginning, of course. Oh, you're the greatest, you're this, you're that, and most of the time, narcissists, they actually study the person. Once they study the person, they understand that, for example, let's say that that person is someone who's very eccentric, right? The narcissist will try to be also eccentric. So it's more like mirroring what you are to yourself. And then therefore you fall in love with what you see. You can actually fall in love. And also the intensity. It's very intense in the beginning, showing you who you are really yourself. Kind of, sort of, right? And then you tend to fall in love with yourself, not understanding that actually what they're mirroring to you is actually yourself. Parts of yourself that you like about yourself too, or parts of yourself that you would like to have in a relationship. That's also the love bombing. So most of the time it's like they will ask you a lot of questions during the dating phase. Like, oh, what do you like? How do you like it? What do you want? Da, 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 da. And then all the responses that you have, those are the responses that they will actually fuel to build this persona, this person that does not exist. It does not exist. Absolutely not. Right? And this fake persona that they bring in the forefront, showing you that that's actually who they are. They are that perfect person. That's where the mask comes from. The mask, it's a mask that they put on, almost like when you go to a masquerade. You go to a masquerade party, you don't know who's who. Everybody's wearing a mask, right? You don't know who looks ugly, who looks nice, who looks good, you don't know who has makeup on, you don't know who has what on, right? Everybody has this mask on. Until everybody takes their mask off, that's when you see really what's behind the mask, right? So that's literally what the narcissist does. The narcissist will go ahead and put on all these persona, acting exactly like that person, that perfect person you would like, that perfect boyfriend you would like, that perfect girlfriend you would like, because narcissists are not only men. Most of the time, of course, there are studies that show that 70 to 75% of narcissists are men. But again, you have narcissists that are women. A lot of them out there, because 25%, 25 to 30%, that's still a huge number. But again, the way they actually show up as a narcissist is different too, which I'll go over in another video. So we have to be mindful that the dynamic, the way they show up, the tactics are different. Now, narcissists will triangulate. Triangulation means they'll go ahead and put somebody else in between. They will put somebody else in between, and it makes it like a three-way thing. Or she say, he say, they say, right? She say, he say, they say. And then the devaluation, that's like, again, after the love bombing. Love bomb and then devaluate. Devaluate means that now so in the beginning, love bombing, oh, you're the best, you da-da-da, and da-da-da. It's the intensity, all the different qualities, fake qualities that never existed to begin with. They mirror those qualities that you told them that you like. They show that, like, if they are that. And then after that phase that goes away, they do not want you to see the mask. But before you get the chance to see the mask, we have to bring you down your big horses, your high horses. So by bringing you down your high horses, what does that mean? They know inside of them they're not adequate. They are very inadequate. And that inadequacy means that I have to make you inadequate to bring you on my level. So therefore we're equals. Now you have all these qualities I don't have. So I have to make sure that I devaluate you. I make sure that I lower your self-esteem. I make sure that I name call you. I make sure that I give you, I don't really value you. I body shame you. I call you all kind of other things. I make sure that I actually even have an affair on you to bring that self-esteem down, to bring your self-worth down, your self-love down. I got to bring all those things that actually makes you so much, that I feel that it makes you so much better than me. I have to bring those down. Once I bring those down, I know that you're stuck with me. Now you're not going nowhere. So therefore, because your self-esteem is down, your self-love is down, your self-worth is down, all those things that you feel that make you feel great about yourself are down. Then now we can talk. Now I can kind of build a bear. I can kind of put the different pieces that I want where I want them, and then they will stay.
You will not go nowhere. You'll be part of those species, and you'll be admiring me. You'll be validating me, because at the end of the day, you'll be addicted, because the love bombing, the whole goal of the love bombing is actually the hot and cold is a cyclic thing. So that makes you addicted. So that love bombing, that feeling, that good feeling in the beginning, so the person stays. Even after the evaluation, we stay behind. We stay in the relationship because we stuck on the love bombing, all that good feeling in the beginning. So therefore, we try our best to do everything and well, if I just do this, if I just do that, maybe, we'll go back to normal. Things will go back like they were in the beginning. Things will be so much better for us. So that's literally what the goal for the love bombing is, to be able to keep us addicted to that feeling in the beginning of a relationship, right? And then we will try our very best to actually do what that person wants us to do, the narcissist wants us to do, so that dynamic can go back to the way things used to be, right? And then eventually they will give us a little bit. It's almost like a mouse and the cheese, right? Mouse cheese. We make mouse do a couple rounds, right? Make it do a couple things, and then we give it cheese. And then guess what? It gets addicted. It will go and keep doing it and come back for the cheese. Eventually, until we stop, or until we decide, hey, well, I'm not giving you no cheese, just go keep doing it without the cheese. So that's literally that. Okay. And then for the other ones, it can be overt, more instead of covert more like hidden, overt more like outwardly in front of everybody. It's outward, it's in front of your face, it's in front of their face, in front of everybody's face, right? There's the fighting, there's arguing. When it comes to, I'm talking about the second abuse, the abuse that is not like narcissistic abuse, the other type of abuse that is different. So we have to be mindful of the differences. The narcissistic abuse is very overt, it's very hidden. That's where all the manipulation tactics come from, techniques, right? And then the overt, the other type of abuses, it's overt, it's right in your face, right? Like physical abuse, violence, explicit threats. I will do this to you if you do this to me, all right? And it's very verbally attacks, and financially too, financial restrictions. Now narcissists do that too. Eventually, over time, they will get there too. When they see that they do not get their way, they switch to different things, and they will go to the extreme to actually make sure that they make the person who they're abusing actually fall in line. Now, eventually, narcissists do that too. The financial abuse, they do that eventually. But will we see that mostly also in other type of abuse, where there's a financial restriction or emotional restriction? Narcissists also, eventually, they get to also do the emotional restriction. They do that too. But in the other type of abuse, it's without needing to maintain the grand persona. It's without needing to maintain, hey, I'm your boss. Hey, I'm this. It's more like, in the other type of abuse, it's more like a punishment. Oh, you're not doing I want power. Well, I'm just going to show you I'm the powerful one. But it's not really for validation. It's more like to prove a point. It's not really for validation, right? But in a narcissistic abuse, it's for admiration and validation. It's admiration and validation. That's the biggest thing. But the different techniques, again, are different, but they also show up differently. So we have to be mindful. Now, we have to also see that there is a public versus private. In narcissistic abuse, they have an entire different front. They have an entire different persona in public compared to private, right? In the public, they show that they're the flawless person. They're charming, flawless, benevolent. They go and help people in the public. They do public services. They are the greatest at helping communities. They're doing charity work. They offering money to different things in the community, in the church. They're the ones who they do all kind of stuff, right? But then they're reserved to abuse strictly to the private relationships. And when they are home, they're an entire different person. That's one of the reasons, again, it's so much harder to get out of narcissistic abusive relationships. Because when we are in a narcissistic abusive relationship, we cannot even go tell people about it. Because why? Because what they show in public and what they show at home are completely different. People would not even believe us because they would say, "What? That person? Nah, you must be lying. You know, that person's not that. He's the deacon at the church, or he's the professor, or he's the doctor down the street. There's no way, you know, you saying that, you know, he's doing all that." So people would not believe us. That's one of the biggest thing. That's one of the reasons also it's so much harder to exit, because of the lack of support, because of the lack of people believing in the stories or in what's happening to us, in the abuse. People don't believe in it. So therefore, it's just easier sometimes to just make a plan and exit. Because again, older people would not believe, therefore it's harder to receive support from people who do not even believe what you're going through. Okay. So that's one of the things. Now, the other type of abusive relationship is it may or may not be really public perception, or sometimes, you know, it's like anger or control issues. It might leak into the public sometimes, or sometimes not. It might or might not. It just depends. Some people are really good at hiding things, again, some people are not. So depending on, again, how, but most of the time really it's overt. It's something that actually is seen in public, because sometimes unfortunately the authorities have to be even called to come to actually intervene because of the physical abuse that can go into it. So we have to kind of think about it in that way, that the overt relationships is not necessarily always seen in public, but it can be seen in public. And when it is, most of the time, it's unfortunately something that's sometimes shocking, but not necessarily, because sometimes family members, friends, and people that usually stay with those same people, or they kind of know a little bit about the history behind everything. So sometimes it's not as I would say surprising to see it, because they kind of already know, oh yeah, such and such, yeah, they're always fighting, right? So it's not as surprising. So we have to be mindful that it's the differences between those two. Now, there's a cyclical pattern to those two. There is a cyclical pattern. Typically, the narcissistic abusive relationship usually follows a pattern. There's always that pattern of idealization. So the love bombing, you're the ideal person, you're the ideal thing I want, you're this, you're that, right? Or showing you that, hey, you know, I'm the best person for you, you know, this is the ideal relationship, and mirroring to you what you actually really want in a man or a woman, right? That's the idealization phase. And then it goes into the devaluation, which is, again, calling you names, triggering certain things, trying to mostly it's the core part is to devalue when it comes to who we are, to make us feel less than by attacking our self-love, self-worth, self-esteem, right? Body shaming. Most of the time, narcissists, even if there is nothing on our body that is actually not really ideal, or I would not even say ideal, I would say decent, right? They will always find something to say about it so that we can feel less than. It can be something as simple as our hair, the way we talk, the way we walk, the way we whatever, right? The way we're intimate, the way we, or comparing us with exes, right? Oh, my ex, you know, she blah, blah, blah. Comparison, trying to just make us feel so much less than, right? In any ways possible. And they study us very well too, to know what actually buttons to push. And those buttons are the ones that they use. Depending on what our insecurities are, those are the insecurities sometimes that they actually focus on. If in the dating phase we ever voice to them that we actually hate a part of on our body, that part is literally what they will use to actually devalue us. So we have to be mindful, right? What we tell people, especially in the dating phase. And then there's the discard phase. The discard phase is actually when they feel like, oh, well, I don't feel like, you know, they will find an excuse to actually dump you. They'll find an excuse to leave you, or to actually, even if they're not physically leaving, right? They will probably triangulate by bringing somebody else, having an affair, having a third person into the thing, into the relationship in somehow, some way, right? And then discarding the person by just physically probably leaving or emotionally leaving. One of those two, either way, right? It's discarding. And then there's hoovering, which is coming back, coming back with an excuse and be like, oh, da 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 da, coming back with an excuse because they do not want us to be with somebody else. So therefore, they hoover, making sure that we're not with somebody else. And some of the time, actually, what they do is they'll make sure that they break us so down that we are not able to go back to somebody else, but to stick with them and come back to them, right? So that's the hoovering part. And then on the other ones, which is the other abusive relationships, often it follows a classic cycle of violence, tension building up, and then we have like something happens, sometimes it's the same thing over and over and over and over, and then we reconcile, and then everything is calm, everything is collected, and then a couple of days again it's the same thing again. We fight for something that is not worth fighting for. It's almost like there's this for some people, because the trauma, I would say the excitement, because they are so used to, that's their normal, the trauma that comes with it. It's not even the trauma, it's actually the toxicity. The toxicity is a type of excitement for them, right? It's a type of excitement that if we are silent, we don't talk, we don't say nothing really, then that means that things are not okay. If we are not fighting, things are not okay. We have to be fighting for us to know that we love each other. In order for us to have love, we have to fight, because that's what they grew up in. That's what they have seen in relationships. They think that that's what love is. They think that that's how everything should be. Otherwise, then there's no love. That's the tension, the fighting, the violence, and the coming back together to reconcile, and honeymoon, right? Then the calm, especially the reconciliation and the honeymooning. That's actually the part that makes it the cyclical. It makes it more stay cyclical, because they're looking forward for that moment. So therefore, we have to keep going back in the loop until we get to that moment. And then now that moment is ephemeral. It doesn't really stay long. Once it's gone, then we have to go back fighting again so we can go back to that honeymooning. So it's mostly the honeymooning that allows people who stay in those toxic patterns to actually keep doing that, because they feel like they need to fight in order for them to get to the honeymooning. It's not sustainable. That's how they see it. It's not sustainable. It doesn't last long. So therefore, the fighting makes it even better once we get to the honeymooning. So we have to be mindful that those two, the differences between those two, either one of those is unhealthy. Both are unhealthy. So we have to be mindful. Either one of those, we gotta go. We have to exit. We cannot stand things like that. Now, when it comes to, I will talk about narcissistic, when it comes to empathy and remorse, right? Narcissistic relationships, that's another big one. In narcissistic abusive relationships, the core characteristic that lack within a narcissist is really those two, especially empathy. In order for you to feel remorse, you have to be empathetic first. I have to be able to feel how you feel in order for me to feel bad for what I have done to you. Now, what they feel is not really remorse. It looks sometimes like a remorse after they have been caught doing something, right? After they have been caught and they have been exposed to the public for who they are. Now, it's not remorse. It's more like shame. I would say it's not even shame, really. It's more like their shame, their inadequacy has been exposed. So therefore, they feel a certain way. They feel bad for being exposed. But it's not that they feel bad for doing what they have done to the abused, with the person they have abused. It's not that. Because remorse is to feel really bad, in a bad place for what you have done for somebody, to somebody else, to harm them, right? That's what it is. But they don't feel remorse. In order for anyone to feel remorse, you have to feel empathy. They do not have empathy, so therefore they cannot feel remorse. Those two go hand in hand. And that's a core thing when it comes to narcissism. There's a lack of remorse, lack of emotional empathy. And apologies, if given, they are usually false. They are not. They're very strategic to regain control again. They are not real. There's no genuine remorse behind those apologies. So we have to always pay attention to the patterns. A narcissist will do something 1,000 times and they will apologize 1,000 times for the same exact thing. But that does not stop them from doing it another 1,000 times, right? If you feel really apologetic for something you have done, that means you have really, if it's a genuine apology, that means you have learned a lesson from what you have done. That means you are really remorseful for what you have done, if it's genuine. Therefore, you should not repeat the same thing again. But in narcissistic abuse, they do not really learn anything from it because it's not genuine. It's not genuine. It's more like strategic because they just want a point of entry again so they can actually inflict another painful cycle, right? And then they keep doing it over and over and over and over and over. Now, an apology, it might change slightly. Sometimes they'll come with gifting. Sometimes they'll be like, well, let's take a trip, or let's I'm sorry, here are flowers, here's chocolate, let me take you out for dinner, right? But they will always have a way to actually come back by, especially if they know our love language. If they know our love language, they will use that against us with an apology to make sure that, okay, I'm gonna squash that and then we can go back to that cycle again, right? And I'm telling you guys these things literally through experience, through things I have went through myself. I have went through myself those same things. And eventually I have learned to clock those fake apologies. I have learned to clock them, to see them, to know even the facial expressions can tell you how fake those apologies were. Over time, again, it takes time for you to know, to see it. It takes decades sometimes to see them. In my case, for sure it did. So unfortunately, nobody wants to spend decades of their lives kind of feeling technically wasted, right? They technically wasted because it's almost like a hamster in a hamster wheel going over and over and over and over about the same exact things over and over. Nobody want to do that. But it benefits the narcissist. It doesn't benefit us for sure, but it benefits them. So we have to be mindful. Now, the other type of abuse it depends, right? It depends. It may feel genuine. It may feel genuine because you will see really there's guilt and shame that will be associated with it. And especially after an outburst. If somebody is emotionally abusive, right, and they have outbursts, and sometimes they might feel really genuinely sorry or genuinely apologetic about it. And they might really feel remorse for what they have done, especially if physical abuse was part of it too, right? If they have laid hand on the person they're with, their partner, they will feel remorse. They will feel really genuine apology. They will have a genuine apologies about it. We will be able to tell. But then again, the pattern, will it really stop? That's the thing that we have to actually ask ourselves. Though without intervention, the patterns, sometimes they will just come back. That's just the sad reality. So that's why it's so much harder to actually see the difference between narcissistic abuse and between narcissistic abuse and or the abusive relationship when it comes to remorse and empathy. Now they'll feel empathy. Sometimes people, the violators will actually even cry about it. You'll see that it's genuine, but that does not, there will be remorse and shame and guilt also for probably mostly for not being able to control themselves, for not being able to stop the pattern. But in order for those patterns to stop, there's a healing component that have to actually be incorporated to be able to seek help. It's not just, yeah, I feel remorse, I feel guilty, I feel shameful for what I have done. But then I'm continuing the same thing. I'm not doing nothing about it to break the cycle, to break the patterns. These patterns that I have learned since I was a small kid. I'm not doing nothing about it. I'm just keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm waiting for something to happen from it, right? So we have to be mindful that the difference is it's still, they both have a cyclical pattern. They both have a cyclical nature to them. Narcissistic abuse and abusive relationships or abuse that is not narcissistic, non-narcissistic ones. They also have a cyclical pattern to them. But the difference between those two is actually the empathy and remorse that you can see in the other type of abuse, and narcissistic abuse does not have that. But they both cyclical. In order for the cycle to break in a narcissistic abusive relationships, most of the time we just have to exit, because narcissistic people who are narcissists, they don't see that they need to fix anything. They don't see it as there's inadequacies. They don't see it as an issue. So therefore, they would not seek help. They would not try to do anything about it. However, other relationships that are non-narcissistic, they can see that there is an issue. They can see that something needs to be done. Now, them taking action to do something about it and break the pattern, that's another topic. Are they going to do something about it? But if they don't do nothing about it, then the patterns continue, right? So we have to be mindful of the differences. So making sure that we understand the differences, that's the entire goal of this episode. Because sometimes we tend to see certain patterns and then we think, oh, they must be just abusive, but they're a full-blown narcissist, right? They're a full-blown narcissist. Now, we might see certain patterns and not understand what those patterns are and think, oh, they just, they're narcissists, but they're not really a narcissist. They're just abusive because they have so many childhood wounds. They have so many generational, relational, and all the type of woundings that they have not addressed over time. And those same woundings, they brought them unhealthy patterns. They brought them into their relationships, right? And they are full-blown releasing those into their relationships. So therefore, we think that they are narcissistic. So we kind of tend to flip-flop those two without actually understanding the differences. So the entire goal for this video is to make sure that we understand the differences. Either one or two, those two, not good, not healthy, but at least the non-narcissistic abusive relationships, those actually can heal. Those can eventually go back to normal. Now, I would never tell no one to stay in any type of abusive relationship, none. But the key here is for the abuser in the non-narcissistic relationships to seek help so that they actually do not keep bringing those abusive patterns, those unhealthy patterns into future relationships. But however, the current relationships, I would never tell no one to stay in any type of abusive relationship. So we just have to be mindful the differences, what exists in them, and if actually there is a chance to heal them or not, right? Now, narcissistic abusive relationships, unless we're aware, like I was talking about in my other channel, which is Soul Symphony Healing, that channel talks about mostly healing about different patterns, generational patterns. I don't talk too much about narcissistic abusive relationships because those are so much of their own category. Narcissistic abusive relationships have their own specific category. That's one of the reasons I created this channel, so that we understand that it's an entire beast on its own. So it needs an entire channel on its own. So that's the reason. All right. So I'll go ahead and stop it here. I hope this information helps. Until next time, please, please, please take care of yourself. Okay. Until then, bye-bye.